this is episode 1 of my new series, Love, Lust, and Witchcraft. The title of this first episode is The First Date. Keep an open mind, pay attention, and don't assume you know what's gonna happen. So this story begins with a man named James. James was married. James had 2 kids by his wife. James had his own construction business. James lived a life, but like every man, James had his flaws. James loved women more than anything, more than money. It seems like every other month he was getting caught up with a different woman, and each woman was crazier than the one before. James tried his best to be faithful, but truth be told, James' grandfather was a hoe, his father was a bigger hoe, James' mama was a hoe. So James was just a product of his environment, representing the generational curse very well. So one day his wife got tired of his mess, like any sensible woman that knows her worth would. And she told James, if you do not get your shit together, I am going to leave you, and I'm going to take you for everything you are worth. I love you, but I did not sign up to be your lifelong fool. Figure it out, or I'm leaving. Now, James' wife did not know, but James had had his first orgasm at 10 because he had been molested by his stepsister from the age of 8 all the way up until the age of 14. So James was hypersexual in every way. He jacked off every chance he could, and he had sex with anything that moved. He never told his wife because, truth be told, he was embarrassed. Begging his wife to not leave him, he told her, baby, I'm sorry, baby girl. I promise I will never do it again. I will never step out on you again, girl. Please don't leave me. He walked towards his wife and he kissed on her forehead and he held her by her waist. And he asked her, do you love me? She said, of course I do. And then James said, show me then, girl. He pushed his wife back on the couch. Now, James' wife loved it when James sucked on her breast. And of course, James being her husband, he knew that. So James began to rip off her shirt and suck on her breast. The moment his tongue made contact with her flesh, she broke character and she became instantly vulnerable, just like James knew she would. As he was sucking on her breast, he removed her panties. And after he removed her panties, he held her legs open wide and he slowly fell off inside of her. Her body began to shake and tremble, and she came instantly, just like James knew she would. Orgasm after orgasm, position after position. About an hour and a half later, it was over. James had fucked her to sleep and fell asleep inside of her. The last thing she said to him was, I forgive you, and I love you so much, baby. But what she did not know was that James had a date later on that night at 10 o'clock with a woman named Tammy that he had met on social media. Now, James had put his phone on Do Not Disturb before he apologized to his wife because he didn't want his phone ringing and getting her attention. So when he finally got to his phone and took it off of Do Not Disturb, he had 6 missed calls from Tammy and 20 different messages. 6 of them was naked pictures from Tammy. The rest were just messages about how she couldn't wait to see him and how excited she was to fuck him. Now, James owning his own construction business, he worked all times of night and crazy hours sometimes. So him leaving in the middle of the night was not unusual. So he took a shower, he got dressed, he wrote a note stating that he got a last minute call and that he had to head into work 1 hour away, but he would only be gone for a few hours. And he made sure to leave it beside his wife carefully and quietly before he headed out the door to meet with Tammy. James left a note, and as he was getting ready to leave the bedroom, he was met in the hallway by his 10-year-old daughter named Serena. She was crying. She had had a terrible dream. Now, if there was anything that James loved more than women, it was his daughter Serena. So he immediately stopped to tend to her. And to his surprise, she had had a dream about him. She had saw him being set on fire, and he was screaming in so much pain. And she told him this, and she said, Daddy, don't leave. I don't think it's safe for you to go anywhere tonight. Something in James told him, stay home. And right when he was about to make the decision to stay, he got a text from Tammy, and it was a picture of her with her panties off and her legs open with a caption that said, come and get it, Daddy. And in that moment, James kissed his daughter Serena on the forehead and said, baby, I will be fine. Go back to sleep, okay? I love you. Daddy's gotta go. So he leaves the house and he meets up with Tammy. Tammy wanted him to meet her father. Now, he hadn't known this woman for no more than 2 weeks, but she told him in her culture, the approval of her father meant everything before she invested in a man. So she made it very clear that James had to meet her father and give a good impression in order to have sex with her. And for James, that is all that matters. So she took James by the hand. She asked him, do you agree to serve my father tonight in order to please me? Paying attention to the way she worded the question, James began to think to himself, serve him? What does she mean by that? And the look on his face demonstrated just that. And right before he opened his mouth to respond, she leaned in and she tongued him down. As she was tongue kissing him, she stopped for a moment and she spit inside the palm of her hand. She slid her hands inside of James's pants and she began to jack him off. And then she asked him again, "Do you agree to serve my father tonight for me?" James, bound by lust, he said yes. Tammy's entire demeanor changed. After that, Tammy said, "Okay, let's go." And she turned around and there was this huge door. It had to be at least 10 foot tall. Ironically, James didn't see it there before, and James was a pretty attentive man. It was almost as if this door appeared out of nowhere. On this door there was this huge symbol that James hadn't seen before, and it had 4 letters that spelled out what looked to be a name going around the symbol. All James could make out was B as in boy. And after that, Tammy pulled his attention away and said, "Hey, let's go. Hurry before it closes." So James began to move forward. As he began to move forward, he felt his phone vibrate. It was a text from his daughter. His daughter had instructed him once more, "Daddy, please come home." He stopped to reply back, and Tammy grabbed his phone and said, "Hey, we have to hurry before it closes." She began to grab his hand and lead him through the door. And what stood before James left him jaw-dropped. They walked into what seemed like a golden palace. It was absolutely beautiful, very much different from where they had just came. James looked back and the door that they had just walked through was gone. He didn't understand it, but again, Tammy redirected his attention and said, "Come on." As they walked forward, he could see this huge statue off in the distance. So with this statue, it was different. On this statue, there was 3 different faces, 3 different heads. The one in the middle was human, and the other 2 were animals. In the middle, it looked like a pharaoh or a king. And on one side, there was what seemed to be some type of cat. And on the other side, it was a type of frog. And then underneath, there was these legs, almost like a crab or a spider. And in the middle, it was that sign again, that symbol, with those same 4 letters wrapped around it. This time, James was close enough to see it, and it read B-A-A-L, ball. After reading that, the energy got really heavy for James, and he turned to Tammy to ask her what was going on, but before he could ask her, the sounds of babies crying began to drown out his thoughts. He looks over, and they were passing out what looked to be infants to each couple. Confused by what he saw, he took the child that they had given him, and he looked into the child's eyes, and it was a beautiful baby boy. James and Tammy were the last couple to receive an infant. After that, Tammy asked to see the baby boy, so James gave her the child, and she began to move forward towards the statue. As Tammy began to move towards this statue, someone whose face that James could not see lit this huge fire around the statue, and it was drop dead silent in the room. James began to get scared, and he began to get confused, and before he could even say a word, Tammy took that beautiful baby boy and threw him into the fire, and the couples behind them did the exact same thing. When every baby was thrown into the fire, everybody began to have sex with one another. Tammy jumped on James and began to give him head. While laying on the floor, another random man got behind Tammy and began to hit her from the back while she was giving James head. Meanwhile, 2 different men began to masturbate. They both ejaculated all over him and Tammy. James jumped up and he began to beat the shit out of the 2 different men. They wrestled him to the ground and they began to take turns raping him. James screamed out for Tammy's help, but Tammy could not hear James due to all the moaning and the children screaming being burned alive. James managed to get up and he took off running and was knocked down within 5 seconds by a strange man. When James regained consciousness, what stood before him blew his mind. It was the man in the statue. The entire room was drop dead silent because all of the babies had finally died. Every set of eyes in the room was on James, including this entity. James began to pray and ask God for forgiveness and help. The entity looked at James and he laughed hysterically. And then Tammy appeared out of nowhere and said, "James, meet my father. Father, meet James." The entity looked at Tammy and said, "He does not worship me. He prays to the carpenter. Burn him." Tammy and the 2 men that had raped James earlier grabbed James and began to drag him towards this fire, and without hesitation they tossed his body into the flames. And now it was James' screams that was filling the room, and it was his flesh that was piercing every nostril in the room. And as his flesh burned, everyone began to have sex again. And the last thing he heard was his daughter's voice begging him to stay home because she had a dream that he was being burned alive. My. Pretty sad what happened. Truth is, that James is a lot of men. There are surely a lot of Tammys out there. So tell me, did James get what he deserved? What do you think?